Even when people are coming up with visions, they're more focused on wordsmithing it, getting it right, rather than like what utility the vision is actually bringing in.
There was someone who was telling me that the vision for their company was democratizing justice. And what did they do? They were actually building a product that was used by.
I've seen people who have very strategic thinking in terms of like how they want to like focus on a specific customer, focus on a specific problem, etc. Even though they started well, the journey goes into a wrong direction at some point of time. What do you think was happening?
Yes, we all know that we need a vision, but what that vision or what a good vision means.
How do you know actually if you have gotten to a point where the vision is the right vision for whatever you're trying to build?
So the purpose of a vision, right, is to create alignment.
I've also seen teams doing OKRs just for the sake of doing OKRs, but they never care to go back and check them.
Sometimes OKRs are completely about sales. It's all about revenue.
But over a period of time, you get stuck into your OKRs. Like you defined OKRs for, let's say, a quarter, you get stuck into those OKRs for the next few quarters.
I found this disease to be so common where we are completely obsessed with moving metrics up and to the right.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of AIinProduct. I'm very excited today because we have someone who challenges the way we think about building products. We often hear the advice, move fast and break things, or fail fast and iterate quickly. But what if this is actually leading us astray? Our guest today says that there is a better way, a more vision-driven approach to building products, and that actually stands the test of time. Join us in welcoming Radhika Dutt, the author of Radical Product Thinking. She is an entrepreneur and a product leader who has helped businesses rethink their approach for product development. Her work has influenced several startups and enterprises alike, keeping products that matter. Radhika, thank you so much for taking time and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Before we deep dive into your book and all the great things that you have done for the industry, I want to understand more about you. Like, how is young Radhika like? Like, were you always driven by products? Were you always driven by building things? Or like, did product management happen unexpectedly to you?
Oh, it definitely happened unexpectedly. But I think a lot of people would say that, right? Like you sort of end up in product. It never used to be a career path. And now I'm dating myself, like way back when. um, so, yeah, I think, from a lot of, I think, Indian parents, it's more like a doctor, engineer, or disappointment. So my background is that I studied engineering at MIT. That was my path. I was going to be a chip designer, studied semiconductor physics and so on, right? But then along the way, something shifted, which was that we ended up starting a company right out of our dorm rooms. And this was back in 1999.
Mhm.
And this was right at the start of the dot-com bubble. And we got funding, and our vision for this company was revolutionizing wireless, right? And this was when 3G was about to be the next big thing, if our listeners remember WAP phones, and now I'm really dating myself, that was the time when we built something super cool, which was an early version of Siri back in 2000, so that you could interact with your devices using voice or text, right? And if you think about it, like, yes, it was a great idea, but that 3G dream never sort of materialized in 1999 or 2000. We were entirely too early to market. And in hindsight, if you ask me, what did revolutionizing wireless mean? I still don't know. All we knew was we wanted to be big. We wanted to be part of this next 3G revolution and blah, blah, but we had no idea what we were really building. And the funny thing is, like, you asked me about the journey to product. I think about the last 25 years, and what has changed? I still see companies being started in exactly the same way. And so my journey to product was hard lessons such as this startup where we built a product that was entirely too early to market. And just realizing that, you don't build something without really knowing what is the problem statement, why must it be solved, and then what is the world that you bring about, right? And so that was this first startup that we had. The product disease that we caught was hero syndrome, this idea that we just wanted to be big, right? But we didn't have a clear idea of what is the problem we were solving. And so the journey to product has been through these tough experiences, but then realizing that product is really a way of thinking, that we've gotten it all wrong, that product is not about building software, building hardware. A mentor once told me sales is a life skill. Whether you're interviewing for a job or trying to get out of a traffic ticket, sales is a life skill. And I think about product in that way. Building product is a life skill.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, let's deep dive a little bit more, right? So when we think about like products, like both of us are product managers, we have been in this journey for more than a decade now. From time to time, we also keep jumping into things like, hey, this is super exciting. We have to like make this happen for our product. Or AI is something amazing that's happening. How do we incorporate that into the products? Rather than taking a step back and thinking, okay, is this really needed for the customer problem? And I want to understand more about that journey that you went through as well, right? So even from a book standpoint, like nobody like wakes up and says, hey, I'm going to write book today. But how was your journey like that? Like what triggered you? And I also read through your book in the last week or so. I'm very intrigued about the like product diseases and stuff, etc. that you described. Can you walk us through the journey?
Yeah. So the real, I mentioned product as a way of thinking. I guess one thing about product as a way of thinking is this realization that, what and what drives me is wanting to create change, right? Having an impact where I feel like I've made a difference. And when you think about product, I've realized that whatever this mechanism is to make a difference, and yes, it may be software, it may be hardware, but it may be something as simple as volunteering. It may be, the freelance graphic design you're doing. It might be even parenting, right? And this is what I mean by a life skill, that product is not a job or a title, that it's a life skill. Because even with parenting, if you know what's the change you want to bring about in the world, you parent your children with this idea in mind that, you want to launch people in the world who are kind and who are thoughtful, for example, right? And so once you start thinking about product in this way, it completely shifts your mindset. And to go back to your earlier question, of just what drives me, it is wanting to create such change, but not being afraid to challenge just a lot of conventional wisdom. I've always been this a bit of this rebel, right? Having to forge my own identity. And I'm happy to tell you about kind of where that came about, having lived in South Africa just after apartheid laws were abolished and blah, blah. We can get to that. But the point in terms of how the book came about was looking at just traditional views of how we should build product, which was, all we have to do is just keep iterating and you'll come up with product market fit, versus seeing reality, which is, you know what? Actually, when you keep iterating, you end up having to pivot a lot. And one, you catch the product disease pivotitis. But two, the reality is you have 2 to 3 pivots before you run out of money or momentum. No matter kind of how much money you have, like you run out of momentum if it's not money. And so running across these diseases over and over, that's kind of what led to this burning question. Is it that we're all doomed to learn from trial and error? And we just follow conventional wisdom, which is, keep iterating. But I'm seeing that it's not working. So do we just keep doing this and learn from trial and error? Or is there a better path? Like, we prescribe a method, like a step-by-step process where we can be more vision-driven, where we can avoid all of these unnecessary pivots, where we can start to use pivots like silver bullets. And so that was the burning question. And it's not like, you're right, it's not like one day we said, oh, let's just write a book. It was more like, I kept seeing these diseases, and we created, me and two ex-colleagues, we talked about these diseases and we said, okay, what if we put out this framework and see if it helps people? So we created that. And the funny thing is, the first conference where we went to present this framework that we had just put for free online, and by the way, it's still for free online, but the first conference, we presented this and someone came over and they were like, oh my God, you guys created the radical product thinking framework. And it felt like we were minor celebrities there, and it turned out that she had found this toolkit online. Not only had she used it, she had found value out of it, and she had then presented it to other people at a conference saying, oh, you should try this out. And so that's where I realized that there was value in writing a book, because there was a need for such a voiceover in terms of how do you build products in a vision-driven way.
Yep. Actually, I have a question on that, right? So, in general, let's take a step back from the book. Every time we try to build a product or a business, we start with vision. Like every product manager starts with some vision. Hey, this is how I want to do it. It like you said, it could be like a hero syndrome where we want to be the best. We could start that way. Or I've seen people who have very strategic thinking in terms of like how they want to like focus on a specific customer, focus on a specific problem, etc. And then with that comes the strategy, with that comes the roadmap, etc. Where do you think people like fall apart? Like even though they started well, the journey goes into a wrong direction at some point of time. What do you think was happening?
Yeah. What I've observed is, yes, we all know that we need a vision, but what that vision or what a good vision means differs for all of us. So, you're right that even when we say I start with a vision as a product person, typically the vision is in very traditional terms. I want to create the best data storage platform. Or it's, my own example was revolutionizing wireless, right? But there are other such vision statements. There was someone who was telling me that the vision for their company was democratizing justice. And what did they do? They were actually building a product that was used by high-end law firms. So there was no democratizing of justice. But this is what we know of vision statements. We feel like they have to be short, memorable. They have to be a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. But the reality is they don't offer the details. So if I were to translate what I mean by this, it's like telling your team, I want to build the biggest, grandest castle, but then you're not telling them, here's the blueprint. This is what I want you to go build, right?
Mhm.
What your team actually needs is the blueprint. And so in the radical vision statement, it's a fill in the blanks so that I'm not focused on the words. I'm not telling you I want to build the biggest, grandest castle. What I tell you is the who, what, why, when, and how. So let me read out an example of a radical vision statement. This was a startup that I had, and which I founded in 2011 and sold in 2014. So here's how the fill in the blank statement would go. So today, when amateur wine drinkers want to find wines that they are likely to like and learn about wine, they have to find attractive looking wine labels or find wines that are on sale. This is unacceptable because it leads to so many disappointments, and it's hard to learn about wine in this way. We envision a world where finding wines you like is as easy as finding movies you like on Netflix. We're bringing about this world through a recommendations algorithm that matches wines to your taste and an operational setup that delivers these wines to your door. And the thing about this vision statement, right, like the power of it, is I hadn't told you anything about this startup. But hopefully after listening to this vision, you knew exactly what we were doing and why we were doing it. And that is the power of radical vision, where it gives you that level of detail.
That's true.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of times, right, even when people are coming up with visions, they're more focused on wordsmithing it, getting it right, rather than like what utility the vision is actually bringing in. And I always see in the platform org which I work, right, everything is like a one-stop shop, right? They want to make it a one-stop shop, right? Every product is like a one-stop shop, right? So I think that's actually not doing any good for it, the team who's actually working on and needs the direction, they have to get towards, right? So my I know I have a follow-up question here, like what do you like when do you stop defining the vision, or how do you know actually if you have gotten to a point where the vision is the right vision for whatever you're trying to build?
And by the way, I love what you said about this one-stop shop. I see that so often, and it leads to the product disease I call strategic swelling, because when you want to be this one-stop shop, and that's the vision, right? Like everything goes. Just keep adding features. It's a one-stop shop. Um, but yeah, when do you know that it's a good vision? So the purpose of a vision, right, is to create alignment both within the leadership team, but also within your product team, so that you want to be able to tell the leadership, like, look, this is what we're building. We're in agreement, right? Because the next time your CEO is on a plane sitting next to someone and they have a brilliant idea for them, right? They'll come back to you and go like, oh, we should add this feature. But then you can point to your vision and go like, well, but does this fit with a vision, right? So you want this sort of alignment with a leadership team, and you want the same sort of alignment with your product team. In terms of how do you know that this is the right vision, the reality is it's always your best guess, right? It's always the best hypothesis that you have given the knowledge of whatever you know. So if you're an early stage startup, you might write this vision statement, and the reality is a month later, you might discover, you know what, our answer to the who question, like in my case, it was amateur wine drinkers, right? Originally, we were thinking like people who are really into wine. But it turns out like that who was absolutely wrong. We discovered that very quickly. Why? Because it turned out those people are rather snobbish. Like they would feel like whatever I know about wine, your algorithm can't possibly tell me more, right? So what I mean by this is when you write your vision, it's your best guess at a given point, and you might discover you're wrong. And the power of such a vision, the fact that you're putting it down on paper and creating alignment, then means you can go back a month later when you discover you're wrong and you point to where you were wrong in your vision and share what you learned, what you're going to do next, right? And the end result of this is that you're avoiding the disease pivotitis because you're now pivoting with gravitas as opposed to this whiplash. Like today we try this, tomorrow we try that, right? It's not just we'll keep throwing things at the wall and iterating to see what sticks. It's a very deliberate approach. So you never will finally know that this is absolutely right. You'll constantly keep maybe making small tweaks to it over time, depending on the pace at which you're learning.
Okay. And are there any tests that you do to understand if you got to that point, or is it more just seeing what the vibe is and then iterating as you go? Tests in the sense like getting some feedback from the team or the users or so on and so forth.
Yeah. And this is such a great question because it relates to strategy as well. So in your vision, right, hopefully in writing what this problem statement is, like, in the likely or my wine startup example, today when amateur wine drinkers want to find wines that they like, that they're likely to like and learn about wine, that problem statement and how they're solving it is based on user research. Like hopefully you've talked to customers, you have a really good pulse of the market. And this also goes to a detailed product strategy. And in the radical product thinking way, it's called a radical strategy, RDCL, where the mnemonic RDCL, the R stands for real pain points. It's not imaginary that you think that these are the pain points. You've actually gone and talked to people, you've observed their pain, and that's how you know. So, no matter how much research you've done, it's still a hypothesis. And so you write this down, and then you're going to keep testing and realizing. The one thing I will say in terms of cadence for how often should you revisit your vision is that, at least every 6 months, if you're not looking at your vision and saying, is this still valid? And definitely every year when you do your strategic plan, just being able to go back to that with your team and saying, is our vision still holding true? Do we need to make changes? And then looking at this whole strategy and then making edits to it, that's really an important piece of strategic planning.
Awesome. So essentially, right, like you would start with the template you have, then have the talk to the customers, have real problems in it, then check on it once in a while, and essentially you would end up with the vision which you think would be the right appropriate driver for what you're trying to build. Cool.
Yeah. Actually, can you talk us through the framework that you brought up right through the book, and can you also probably give us more details on like what are the different steps we can take to like probably implement that structured approach?
Yeah. So the radical product thinking way of thinking about product is very much of this engineering mindset that you can engineer the change you want to bring about. So to engineer this change, you have to know what is the change you want to bring about so that you can actually start to systematically implement it, right? And so that's where the vision comes in. So that's the first element. But but the big picture is that there are 5 elements in total: vision, the strategy, prioritization, execution and measurement, and culture. Now, all of these are words that we've heard before, but as you saw in the vision statement, the radical part of it is we think very differently about it. Like, it's not this being the leader in, but it's a detailed vision statement. So similarly, the strategy is the RDCL strategy, where the R is, as I mentioned, is real pain points. The D stands for design, or what is the solution to each of those pains? The C is capabilities, meaning, here's the solution that you've talked about, but what's the underlying engine? You at the very beginning had gone to AI and how very often as product people, we want to jump to AI. And funny enough, I've experienced this when I was building this wine startup, and I mentioned, we wanted to give people a personalized algorithm for what wine are you going to like? Our initial thought was, oh yeah, we're going to add machine learning, et cetera, to it, right? But when you think about the C for capabilities, we realized actually, maybe we don't need machine learning, et cetera. Like the initial test of this just needs to be, what? If you like wines, or if you like your tea or coffee black, then you're going to like more tannins, which means I can have a simple database lookup that gives you, here are the wines that you're going to like if you like your tea or coffee black, versus if you like it with milk or sugar, here are other wines you're going to like. So this sort of simplicity, the C for capabilities is, what's the simplest solution that powers what you want to build? And then you can continue to build on it, right? And then the last L for logistics in this RDCL strategy is your business model. How do you think about your business models, sales channels, communication? How will you support your product? These are the elements as product managers. We're like, okay, we're going to build a product, and then someone else is going to think about how to support it. But as a product manager, right, you increase your influence in the organization if you've thought through this comprehensive strategy. So far we talked about vision, strategy. I'll take a pause, and then I can talk about some of the other elements.
Yeah, and I have a question, right? So, in the framework you listed out, so how are these steps going on? Are they sequential or they're cyclical?
Excellent question. So when I actually use this, I find that I might write a vision one day, and then I write the strategy maybe on the same day or the next day. But then, I have to come back to it a week or 2 afterwards. And what happens is, in the meanwhile, it's percolated in your head. And as you start to use this vision and strategy, you realize that there are things that you need to come back and revisit. And so think of this as, it's a working document, right? And it's a communication tool that you continue to build on over time. So you don't sequentially have to do all of it and in one stretch. The one thing I will say is the prioritization element is something that I use every day almost, certainly every couple of weeks as part of sprint planning. So I'll talk about prioritization for a moment. The thing that we use for prioritization usually as product people, it's usually approaches that involve a spreadsheet. There's usually a magic spreadsheet that we use, and we will list all of these features and different weights for different factors, etc., whether it's rice, Moscow, whatever you want to call these different prioritization elements. But in the end, it results in a magic spreadsheet that spits out that feature. This is number 57, and this other feature is number 5. And if you ask anyone in your team, like, why is this 57 and why is this 5? They go like, well, the spreadsheet said so. And so the problem with this approach is, as a product person, your influence is limited to whoever is reading this magic spreadsheet. And so in the radical product thinking way, the way you prioritize is a very visual way. So it's a communication tool. The visual way is vision is the y-axis. It's the long term, right? So is this good for the vision or not? And the x-axis is this good for the short term or not, or survival? And so when I think about the quadrants that emerge from this, things that are good for vision and survival, those are the easy decisions, right? But if we're always focused on those easy decisions, then we're being still very myopic. Sometimes you have to do what is investing in the vision, which is it's good for the vision, but it's not good for short-term survival. So examples of this would be fixing tech debt, doing user research, refactoring, etc., right? The opposite of investing in vision is vision debt, which is it's great for survival, but it's really bad for our long-term vision. So an example of this is, if I build custom software so that I can win this mega deal, right? I'm taking on vision debt. But over time, if I take on too much vision debt, that causes the product disease I call obsessive sales disorder. And so, as you think about priorities, even for your sprint, or you're talking to leadership and pushing back on a feature, I use this vision versus survival to say, how often are we taking on vision debt? How often are we investing in the vision? Are we finding this correct balance between vision versus survival?
That makes sense. Actually, I'm also very intrigued on the diseases part, right? I know we briefly touched upon it. Can you also go through like some of the top or some of the diseases that you mentioned in the book, and how we can identify those and then probably like eliminate them within our work?
Yeah. So the first one I mentioned was pivotitis, right? When we keep whiplashing between what's the next golden idea we want to go after. The second is obsessive sales disorder, where we keep trading off the long-term vision in exchange for getting short-term gains, right? Another disease is what I call narcissist complex, which is where we're so focused inwards and looking at what is it that we need that we forget to think about really what is it our customers need, right? In this startup that I gave an example of, the wine startup, I remember thinking, if I just built these features, I would use it. And that was totally narcissist complex, right? Where we think, if I would use it, clearly my customers are going to love it, right? So that's narcissist complex. Another disease I often come across is what I call hypermetricemia. And the more we focus on OKRs and targets, I found this disease to be so common, where, we are completely obsessed with moving metrics up and to the right, but we don't always think about, are these even the right metrics to focus on? So those are a few diseases where, if you recognize them, it's important to name it and talk about it openly because they're so common. And once you name it, then you can solve it because, what I mentioned with radical product thinking, what I've observed is that these diseases happen when there's a break in the chain in translating vision into your everyday activities. Like whenever there's a break in the chain between vision, strategy, priorities, execution, and measurement and culture, that's where diseases creep up.
Yeah. I mean, I can totally see that in my company too. Not just my company, like previous companies too. Like, for example, like let's take Intuit. I worked at Intuit for some time, and their vision is building prosperity around the world, something like that. It's a very broad vision, and many a times we struggle to like correlate to that. I mean, one good thing that Intuit does is they have something called big bets. That's like a company level strategy that's given to everyone, and every initiative lines up to one of those. And when we write the initiatives or PRD documents and stuff, we try to line up to that. But over a period of time, you get stuck into your OKRs. Like you defined OKRs for, let's say, a quarter, you get stuck into those OKRs for the next few quarters and say, like, okay, I'm still stuck at 70. Do I still need to improve it? How do I improve it? Etc. Yeah.
Yeah, and I could also relate to two of these diseases, like with some of these, right? So I was a part of an organization which is a lot sales driven. So they were always ending up building these one-off solutions for the customers because there were dollars coming in, and the engineering team was struggling so much that they have to keep up with one-off solutions rather than building something that is actually contributing to the customer. So that's like a disease by itself, right? And I've also seen teams doing OKRs just for the sake of doing OKRs, but they never care to go back and check them anytime in the quarter. But they come back after the quarter just to fill it up and then create new ones. So yeah, absolutely. I think all of these are kind of very relatable.
I love it. And in fact, that's what's prompting me to work on my next book, actually, about OKRs and radically rethinking metrics. I mean, what you described, right, on OKRs and this phenomenon of either working on OKRs and you're not sure, are these even the right ones that we should continue following versus, right, I don't even look at OKRs. I do whatever I'm supposed to do, mostly because it's all sales driven. And by the way, sometimes OKRs are completely about sales. It's all about revenue, revenue, revenue. And it's almost like, yeah, and that at that point, you don't ever invest in the vision because it's all about, I'm just going to work on whatever brings in revenue.
That's right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, this next book that I'm working on is about the fact that when you're in this OKR driven environment, what happens is this muscle to experiment, figure out, is whatever I'm working on the product, is it actually working? Like, how well is it working? What have I learned? And therefore, what am I going to do next? That muscle sort of atrophies over time when we're just focused on delivering on a few specific OKRs. And OKRs indeed are intended to bring that focus to a very few specific metrics, right, by design. But it leads to this muscle atrophying where you're thinking more holistically about what's working, what's not. What have I learned from all of these different metrics? And so this book is about what's an alternative to OKRs so that we can actually build better products and drive longer term success rather than just, let's just do whatever brings in revenues or focus on a few metrics, but we don't know if those are the right metrics quarter after quarter.
Can you also give us a glimpse of like what's coming up in the book? Like, how are you giving us the alternatives?
Cool. So the alternative is called Objectives, Hypotheses, and Learnings. So instead of OKRs, OHLs. And it's based on this idea. I was speaking with someone who was sharing with me that they had had a stroke in 2017 and in 2020. And, their way of thinking about products sort of changed after that. And it was this idea that left brain, right brain, roughly, that we talk about scientifically. It's more like the attention network versus imagination network, that when one is active, the other is not. So if I think back to OKRs, it's the idea that when we're thinking about just very specific metrics, we're all about, let me show you that, look, I've achieved the OKR that you set for me. Ta-da, it worked. I'm not trying to figure out actually through experimentation what is working, what is truly not working, what have I learned from this, that creativity of figuring out that narrative. And that's what the book helps you do, that, as a leader, how do you in transition from OKRs to OHLs to be able to drive growth in your organization. Because OKRs, although this is what we've learned, that you need goals to grow your organization, it turns out that's not actually scientifically proven or anything. It's more like anecdotal. When billionaires say this is how you build products, we say yes, right? So this is, again, challenging a lot of conventional wisdom. So how do leaders transition from OKRs to OHLs to truly drive innovation and company growth? And second, for individuals, how can you apply this so that one, work is more satisfying, but two, you can thrive within an OKR-driven environment to truly innovate and build better products?
Awesome. So I see that we have gone through and discussed vision, the framework, and the diseases and all of these things, right? So if I were to if I'm somebody working at a bigger organization, like how would I introduce this concept to the organization and educate people that we could build things in a better way? Maybe if you can throw light on that, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the biggest challenges in an organization is, you might realize that our vision sucks. We need a better vision. But, you might be seen as this bull in a china shop. Like, why are you coming in and challenging the vision? Who are you to challenge this vision, right? And so what do you do as an individual contributor if you're running into this issue? Versus, if you're a leader, it is easier to be able to go in and say, I learned about radical product thinking. We all need to come up with a better vision. It's easier to do this top down. So what do you do if you're an individual contributor? And the answer for me that I've discovered over time is you have to do this very gently, but assertively, right? So instead of attacking the vision, what you do is in the next conversation with leadership, for example, let's say you're pushing back against, the example you were giving, Sid, where there's all this, sales-driven one-off features that are being driven. You can draw up the vision versus survival prioritization rubric. And then you can say, look, here's how much vision debt we're continuing to take on. Do we want to continue to do that? And what are the consequences of doing that? Versus, here's how we can invest in the vision. And it sort of begs this next question, which is, okay, what is our vision? And then, you can be prepared as a product manager. In your back pocket, you've written out this radical vision statement and you share, this is how I think of the vision, but, I could be wrong. What do you think? Is this the right vision? Should we edit it together? And this is sort of the gentle, I'll say almost sneaky way of introducing it. But by introducing it in this facilitative way, you're not challenging things head on, but you're facilitating conversations, which increases your influence, but makes it more palatable for others to be able to see a different perspective. And in the end, you know what? You might even conclude that taking on this vision debt is the right thing to do because this is a matter of survival for the company. And we all agree that we're a bootstrapped company. We're going to take on vision debt, but at least as a team, you feel a little bit better that, we agree what is the vision. We are acknowledging that this is vision debt. That in itself is honestly a relief for someone who cares about the vision when you're passionate as a product person, right?
Awesome. Yeah, and I also see that, right, like with AI coming into the picture, everything is accelerating at such a greater pace, right? So I see that all of these cycles or the stages where you go through in building products, right? Even writing stories, PRDs, or even creating the first MVP, right? So we were able to actually build the first MVP of a concept which we were thinking in like 60 minutes, right, with using all of these tools. So how would this all of this acceleration and all change when it at least relates to product thinking, and what do you think people should basically use right while building these tools?
I love this question, and this is something I've been thinking a lot about. And so I'm going to share my answer, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts and to see if this resonates. One of the things that AI is really good at, like you said, is acceleration, right? But what it does is it replicates patterns in what it sees in human past, basically. And when I say past, I'll just say digital past, even, like, so it's very, let's just say recent past. So the pattern that emerges in the digital world is a pattern that that Cory Doctorow calls enshittification. Basically, what happens is platforms, the way they have grown and deteriorated, it's this 3-step pattern of enshittification. The first step is, you lock in users by giving them value. Step 2 is you abuse users to give value to business users, to business customers, right? And step 3 then is you screw both business and users to then give value to shareholders. This is how Cory Doctorow describes it. And let's look at examples. This has happened with Facebook, right? First, they give value to users, like, oh, I'm able to connect with all of these people that I'd lost touch with. Second, they take value from users and give it to businesses, which is, I'm going to mine all of your data and then shoot lots of advertising at you. Whether or not you wanted to see this, I'm going to cram this at you so that I'm giving value to businesses. And step 3 is, now I'm screwing over businesses and publications so that publishers, so that I can give value to shareholders, right? And then once you get to enshittification, that third step, you start to see that the platform can get so bad that everyone starts to decide, okay, I've had enough. So there's network effect, and then there's a decline because people say I've had enough. So this has happened with Facebook. You see this now starting to happen with Uber. Uber's pricing was great. Now you see that pricing is completely unpredictable. It's not even about surge pricing. Surge pricing was when they started abusing users, but it's gotten shittier. Now it's differential pricing, both for the drivers as well as people to drive value for shareholders. You can see enshittification everywhere, right? Now let's come to AI. As a product person, when we are not being thoughtful, when we're not being thoughtful about how we're including AI, the grand risk that I see is overall enshittification, not just for your own product, but let's now think that everyone is using AI to accelerate this path. How do I quickly give value to users? How do I quickly take value from users and give it to business users? And then, like, how do I erode value from everyone so that it's a shitty product that you can't get away from? Imagine everyone is doing this and AI is accelerating that path. The biggest risk, I think, with AI is creating an enshittified world that is uniformly, homogeneously enshittified. And that is not a better world. So I think, a lot of the question for product people is, what is it that you want to contribute to society? And how thoughtful are you willing to be? I'm not asking for altruism here. Obviously, our products need to make money, but this is the grand risk that we're trading off. I'd love to hear kind of if this resonates for you and what you think.
Yeah, I know. My side of things, right? I've been just flirting with this idea of, like, what if we take all the tools right now, and accelerate the whole product development life cycle. So currently, in a traditional way, like, how would I start, right? I would start with a vision, then maybe have a product strategy on how I'll get to that vision. Then I'll set, like, a set of objectives, key results that again drives to features and so on and so forth, right? But now, I don't even have to do that, right? So I say that, okay, this is what the vision is, this is what the problem I want to solve. Then I go in and give a prompt. I have actually a working feature. Essentially, I don't need to actually talk to the developer, write user stories, or even talk to the designers to come up with the design and so on and so forth. And essentially, all of that I would have done with a lot of different people, and then gotten to a point where I've gotten feedback from the users, right? But now I don't even need to go to that point. I can directly go to the users to get the feedback. So I was like, do I even need to do this? Because I'm actually getting feedback from the user itself on how the end feature would look like. I can build these features faster than I'm writing user stories. So that's actually changing. That's like a 360-degree pivot and whatever I'm trying to do, or any other product manager is trying to do. So I don't know. I don't have any answers for that, but I'm just doing a thought exercise of how would this change the way people are building products, and how would it affect the engineering teams, the design teams which are working together.
This actually relates a lot to your framework, Radhika, the new one that you're talking about, OHL. Basically, you have an objective that you want to achieve. You have a hypothesis that you want to try and do. Just build a prototype like Sidhu was talking about, and as quickly learn through it, and then continually, like, change it. Like if this hypothesis is right or wrong, like get another hypothesis and continue. And going back to the examples that you were talking about, right? Uber and many other companies, actually, I can totally relate to that. So even Instacart recently, I was trying to like order something. The amount of service charges and the amount of delivery fees and stuff that they add are crazy, because when they started, they're like, hey, we want to make it as easy for you guys. Then it turned into like helping companies, obviously, so that it's easy for them. They don't have to think about drivers. But now it's shitty for both of them. Where the company is going up and then revenues are growing, but both the people are like, okay, am I like, how much am I paying? Am I paying too much? Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, but and to both of your points, like you're right, Sid, that it can accelerate so much of what we build. That whole cycle of being able to build something, try it out, etc. It really can accelerate all of that. And Phani, you're really emphasizing this pattern that is so generalized of enshittification, right? Like we know this happens. We know that this is what optimization sort of drives towards. And so, as a product person, I think we hold power when we're using AI, that we can choose to accelerate this path to enshittification if we're not being thoughtful about it. And, like the more we are just busy, busy, busy and just working on things and don't take time to reflect, the more we drive this path to enshittification in an accelerated way with AI. And so I guess what I would say is there's a whole culture right now of not taking the time to reflect. What are we building, and what are we causing in this world? And I'm not asking for altruism, just reflection. That's, I think, what I would suggest that we can change our way of being around. Like at least just take time to reflect, as opposed to being busy, busy, busy all the time, right? And there's a whole culture of not reflecting. This really struck me, that there was an interview that Sam Altman gave on New York Times, and he was asked after ChatGPT was released. The question was, it's been about a year since ChatGPT was released. What are your reflections over the last year? And his answer was, it's been such a year. It's been so busy. I haven't had the chance to reflect. And you think, for God's sake, if there's one thing that's needed, it's a little bit of reflection from someone who holds so much power. So let's bring this down to all the way, maybe you're not building AI and the next set of models for AI, but as a product person, if you're using AI, you're still holding power. Take the time to reflect. Like what is your vision? What is your strategy? What are your hypotheses? What is the world that you want to create? What are you learning in terms of how you implement AI, what the results are? Is it in line with what you want to create in the world? I think that's the only thing that is going to slow down this path of enshittification.
Sense. No, this is great, Radhika. This has been a like amazing conversation. Thanks for taking time. But before we close, I just want to ask you a couple of things. One, your book has been amazing, and I think I changed my thought process a little bit too in the last week or so. Beyond this, like any other books that you would recommend to people, or the podcasts and stuff?
I love this question because, and thank you, that means a lot to me. One of the hopes that I've always had for the book is people saying that it changed my way of thinking. So what you said means a lot. Thank you. In terms of other book recommendations and podcasts, etc., I think, interestingly, I always recommend to people that in reading, we have to read such a wide variety. And it's not that many product books that I recommend. I actually recommend books that give us a holistic take on the world, because our whole world is a set of systems that are all interconnected. So to build better products, we have to know the system of interconnected products really well. So examples of books that I've really loved recently, there's a book called The Tyranny of Meritocracy, I think is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
How to Be Perfect by Michael Shore. It's a book that summarizes philosophy. Troubled. It is a whole book about the foster care system and the whole system and how it shapes people and what is wrong with the system. A book by Edward Snowden called Permanent Record. Attack Surface, which is fiction by Cory Doctorow. But I think if you read Attack Surface followed by what Edward Snowden writes, it's a taste of the world. So those are a few examples of books that I think provide this really interesting take. And one more that it's called Invisible Women. Yes, that's the one. So yeah, those are a few books. And in terms of podcasts, one of my favorite ones is Esther Perel, Where Should We Begin? I think it's a great podcast that gives you such a deep insight into oneself. And lastly, by the way, I'm starting a podcast. It's going to be called Product Gossip. So this is a sneak preview that I am starting it. It's not out yet.
Awesome. This is great, Radhika. Again, thank you so much for taking time with us. We love the conversation, and we'll share all the details and all the links in the descriptions and stuff as well. Thank you.
Thank
Awesome.
you so
And-
much for
and-
having me. This was so much fun.
And if anybody wants to find you, where can they find you?
Well, thank you for asking that. So please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I always love to hear from people and how they're using radical product thinking. So find me on LinkedIn. You can also look up the Radical Product Thinking book. It's on Amazon and anywhere books are sold. And there's a Radical Product Thinking blog on radicalproduct.com. And you can also find the free toolkit there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.